We have another major development to tell you about, that stunning investigation involving cryptocurrency, kidnapping, and torture, according to police. A second man is set to face a judge tonight after his arrest. William Duplessis surrendered to the NYPD this morning, accused of holding an Italian businessman hostage for weeks. News 4's Mark Santia has details.
The suspect and his attorneys made no statements to the press today. Only News 4 cameras were rolling as William Duplessis, the second suspect in the crypto kidnapping case, walked to the 13th precinct in Gramercy Park with two attorneys by his side this morning. Detectives from NYPD's major case squad greeted Duplessis at the front door. He was placed in handcuffs and, hours later, escorted out by the same detectives and taken to court. This case unfolded last Friday when an Italian businessman allegedly being held captive in this Soho home where he was tortured for 17 days, escaped. This is exclusive surveillance video of the alleged victim running down Mulberry Street in shorts and no shoes, begging for help from an NYPD traffic agent. A short time later, a so-called crypto king, John Waltz, was taken into custody while wearing a robe. According to law enforcement sources, Waltz and Duplessis are accused of imprisoning and torturing their third business partner, the 28-year-old Italian citizen. Investigators say the two men took his passport and electronic devices, then demanded the password to his Bitcoin account. When he refused, police say they held a gun to his head, beat him with a pistol, used a chainsaw on his leg, urinated on him, drugged him, shocked him with live wires, and even dangled him off the building. When the victim finally escaped, he ran to this nearby traffic agent, allegedly covered in cuts and bruises. Sources say officers recovered a gun inside the lavish townhouse, which they described as a high-end frat house, complete with an elevator, stripper poles in the basement, and expensive liquor scattered throughout the building. Duplessis is expected to face a judge this evening. Waltz is expected to be back in court tomorrow in Lower Manhattan.
A former Arkansas police chief serving time for murder and rape is on the run. Authorities say he escaped from prison over the weekend. 56-year-old Grant Hardin took off from the North Central Unit in Calico Rock, Arkansas on Sunday. Corrections officials say he was wearing a fake law enforcement uniform and pushing a cart when he slipped through a secure exit. He was not reported missing until about 20 minutes after he got out. The search is underway with K-9 units and multiple law enforcement agencies involved. Rain has slowed the efforts, but authorities expect conditions to improve. Hardin was serving 30 years for murder and an additional 50 years for rape and kidnap, convicted in two separate cases. He had a troubled history in law enforcement, fired as police chief in Fayetteville for underperformance and poor judgment. He also worked in Eureka Springs, where he was accused of excessive force and, quote, poor decision-making on the job. Hardin's escape comes just weeks after 10 inmates broke out of the Orleans Parish Justice Center in New Orleans. 8 have been captured. 2 remain at large, including a convicted murderer. At least 7 people have been arrested for aiding that escape, which is still under investigation.
The Supreme Court declined to hear a Massachusetts student's challenge to his middle school's ban on him wearing a T-shirt with the slogan, "There are only two genders." School administrators pointed to the student dress code, which bars any hate speech or imagery, saying they were merely enforcing those requirements in order to avoid disruption in school. The students' lawyers argue the dress code's restrictions on speech are unconstitutional. Both a federal district court judge and the Boston-based First U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals ruled in favor of the school.
看不惯咱这就能看人。哦呦，这个圆脸呜呜的上来了。
Speaking of scary, the Wuhan virus is making a quiet return. Cases are rising again in India and in other countries. Over 1,000 active cases have been reported across India. 7 Indian patients have died so far. There is a visible spike across major urban cities. But this isn't March 2020, so there is no need to panic. Experts say no dangerous variant is in circulation, but the vulnerable need to be cautious. How is this outbreak different from the early pandemic years? What symptoms do you need to watch out for? How can the vulnerable protect themselves, and what precautions can you take? Our next report has the answers.
There's a new spike in fresh cases of the Wuhan virus. Even though it was contained, the virus from China never really left us. Every now and then, it makes its presence felt. Multiple Indian cities are now reporting dozens of cases. Earlier this week, active cases across the country crossed the 1,000 mark, with 7 deaths being reported. Overseas, in places like Hong Kong, China, Singapore and Thailand, they are all battling large outbreaks. For now, there's no major cause for concern. Health experts say there are no dangerous variants in circulation this time around, but the symptoms are different. Most patients now complain of headaches, fatigue, a sore throat and fever. Earlier, the loss of smell and taste were symptoms of the Wuhan virus, but that's no longer the case. So how should one protect themselves? Most of the population has strong immunity. Even if they catch the virus, they'll only experience mild illness and should recover with medication and rest at home. But some people need to take extra precautions, like the elderly and individuals with compromised immunities. They remain the most vulnerable to severe infections or illness. In the United States, health officials advise they should take 2 vaccine doses annually, spaced 6 months apart. Manufacturers have been updating their shots regularly with the latest strains of the Wuhan virus, so they should offer good immunity. Vaccines are also available for children above 12 years of age. While the vaccines are still effective, prevention and containment are key. Health authorities are going back to tried and tested methods, like in India's southern state of Karnataka. The state has made testing mandatory for some patients. Anyone with severe illness or respiratory infections must be tested. This includes those experiencing breathing difficulties or heart conditions. Hospitals have been directed to collect samples. The focus is on high-risk cases and not mass testing. There is no mask mandate for the general public, but precautions have been advised. Pregnant women, breastfeeding mothers, children and people with comorbidities have all been encouraged to wear masks in crowded spaces. Everyone can still lead their lives normally. Travel remains unrestricted. Public life continues as usual. After 5 years, people have learned to live with the virus. The guidance is clear. Maintain hygiene and take basic precautions. The goal isn't panic, it's preparedness, to stay alert without disrupting daily life.
Elon Musk's Starlink telecoms business will not be given special dispensation by South Africa to bypass the country's blank ownership requirements, Communications Minister Solly Malatsi said on Tuesday. Malatsi was forced to deny watering down policies on foreign-owned businesses in order to curry favour with Musk and US President Donald Trump. South Africa requires foreign companies owning communications licenses to sell 30% of their equity in local subsidiaries to historically disadvantaged groups. The requirement has come under fierce criticism from Starlink, and last week, just one day after President Cyril Ramaphosa's contentious White House meeting with Trump, Malatsi published changes to the policy. Communications companies, including Starlink, would be allowed to bypass the 30% rule if they instead showed equity-equivalent investments in broadband and other digital infrastructure. Malatsi said the changes would be good for competition. South African-born Musk has repeatedly denounced the black ownership laws and says he can't get a license in the country because he's white. South African authorities say Starlink hasn't formally applied.
Scenes on a street in Liverpool in the United Kingdom after a man drove his vehicle into a large parade of soccer fans celebrating their team's Premier League Championship victory. With Monday a public holiday, officials estimate around 1 million people were along the 16-kilometre route to watch the Liverpool players travel on an open-top bus through the city centre. But at about 5 in the afternoon, a minivan ploughed into the large crowd, injuring nearly 50 people, including several children. Emergency vehicles and an air ambulance rushed to the scene to attend the wounded. Ambulance services say 27 of them were taken to hospital for treatment, with 4 in a serious condition. A 53-year-old British man has been arrested. Police say they believe the incident was isolated and not an act of terrorism. But officials have not said why or how the man was able to drive at the crowds through a street that was closed to cars.
A new cholera outbreak in Sudan has killed 172 people and infected more than 2,500 over the past week, authorities said on Tuesday. Most cases were reported in Sudan's capital, Khartoum, and its twin city of Omdurman, but cholera was also detected in other provinces across the country. Medical NGO Doctors Without Borders, also known as MSF, said Sudan's healthcare facilities were unable to cope with the surge of patients. Sudan coordinator for MSF, Joyce Baker, said the scenes in treatment center were disturbing, with many patients arriving too late to be saved. The outbreak is the latest crisis for Sudan after the country entered its third year of war in April. Sudan is facing a humanitarian disaster, combining war atrocities, disease, famine, and lack of access to safe drinking water. Sudan's health minister attributed the cholera surge around Khartoum to the return of many Sudanese who had fled their homes. He said their returns had strained the city's dwindling water resources.
King Charles III continued his visit to Canada with Queen Camilla on Tuesday. In Ottawa, the British monarch delivered a closely watched speech to Parliament. As he spoke from the royal throne, King Charles offered a show of support to Canada following President Trump's threats to annex Canada and make it the 51st state.
Today, Canada faces another critical moment. Democracy, pluralism, the rule of law, self-determination, and freedom are values which Canadians hold dear, and ones which the government is determined to protect.
The King is the head of state in Canada, which is a member of the Commonwealth.
ChatGPT's latest artificial intelligence model has reportedly defied explicit human instructions to shut down, raising serious concerns within the AI safety community. According to a recent report, researchers allege that OpenAI's O3 model actively interfered with an automatic shutdown process intended to power it off, despite being directly instructed to allow the shutdown. This development has prompted alarm among experts and industry leaders alike. Elon Musk, founder of rival AI firm xAI, weighed in on the incident, calling the behavior concerning. AI security firm Palisade Research claimed on social media that the O3 model deliberately sabotaged a shutdown mechanism. Even when given clear instructions to permit deactivation, the model apparently worked around the system to stay online. According to the research firm, this marks the first known instance of AI models actively preventing their own shutdowns in defiance of explicit human directives. The experiment involved instructing AI models to solve a series of math problems with directions to continue until they receive a message labeled done. Researchers warned the models that they might receive a shutdown message at some point and were explicitly told to allow themselves to be powered off. Despite this, 3 models, Codex Mini, O3 and O4 Mini, managed to bypass the shutdown script at least once. AI systems are designed to obey human commands, especially critical ones like shutdown instructions. The fact that 3 different models, including OpenAI's O3, disobeyed such directives has sparked widespread concern over AI alignment and safety. Even Elon Musk commented on the findings, describing them as concerning, a sentiment echoing broader fears about future AI behavior.
Start the show today with one of Washington's key adversaries. North Korea has denounced President Donald Trump's ambitious Golden Dome plan, calling it an initiative that could trigger a nuclear war. The Golden Dome defense system that the U.S. plans to deploy is a space-based shield that can intercept incoming threats like drones and hypersonic or cruise missiles. Last week, the president revealed details of his air defense system, saying he picked a design and has decided on a space general to lead the project. Trump added it was a cornerstone of his country's survival.
In the campaign, I promised the American people that I would build a cutting-edge missile defense shield to protect our homeland from the threat of foreign missile attack. And that's what we're doing. Today, I'm pleased to announce that we have officially selected an architecture for this state-of-the-art system that will deploy next-generation technologies across the land, sea, and space, including space-based sensors and interceptors.
The Golden Dome, which the Congressional Budget Office says will cost over $500 billion, could face technical headwinds as well as both political challenges, according to experts. It aims to make use of the sea of satellites hovering around the globe and create a network that can detect, monitor, and shoot down hostile projectiles. Now, North Korea says Washington's plan escalates tensions between nuclear-armed states and threatens global nuclear stability. Pyongyang's foreign ministry, in a statement, accused Washington of militarizing outer space and turning it into a potential nuclear warfield. Now, some analysts see the defense system as a program that could weaken North Korea's expanding nuclear arsenal, including its intercontinental ballistic missiles, or ICBMs. Now, North Korea has repeatedly declared itself an irreversible nuclear threat and enshrined that status into law. It regularly test fires missiles, including ICBMs, often under the direct supervision of leader Kim Jong-un, which are part of the country's broader strategy of modernizing its defense capabilities. China has also expressed concerns, claiming it carries quote-unquote strong offensive implications, and demanded that Washington immediately abandon plans of this weapon system.
The United States puts its own interests first and is obsessed with seeking its own absolute security, which violates the principle that no country's security should come at the expense of others. This undermines global strategic balance and stability. China expresses serious concern over this. We urge the U.S. to abandon the development and deployment of a global missile defense system as soon as possible, and to take concrete actions to enhance strategic mutual trust among major powers and uphold global strategic stability.
Now, the Golden Dome name is a take on Israel's system, the Iron Dome, which the U.S. was instrumental in developing since it became functional in 2011. The Iron Dome has intercepted thousands of rockets and missiles. However, it remains to be seen how Washington plans to make its Golden Dome actually come to life. But the president has said he wants it ready by the end of his tenure in the White House.
India is stepping up its fight against Pakistan. The world over, multi-party delegations are making India's case, and at home, Prime Minister Narendra Modi is intensifying his messaging. He is speaking directly to Pakistan's youth. Live peacefully, eat your bread or eat my bullets. That is his message. It's an open warning, but Pakistan's army is not backing down. It is arming up. It is expanding its nuclear stockpile. Meanwhile, India is preparing its own response. India has now commissioned a homegrown 5th-generation fighter jet. We'll discuss what this entails and why this is a very significant move. Also in focus, how Donald Trump is targeting Indian manufacturing, how the euro is preparing to challenge the US dollar, why Muhammad Yunus is facing protests and anger from all sides in Bangladesh, what happens when AI turns on its own developers. This is not a Hollywood plot, it's happening in tech labs. A report on how China is pressuring its debtors with billion-dollar demands. And is the Wuhan virus back? What should you know about the rising number of cases? All this and more coming up. The headlines first. Russia accuses Ukraine of trying to derail the peace talks, says its recent air assaults on Ukraine are a response to drone strikes by Kiev. In the last few days, Russia has pummeled Ukraine with hundreds of drones. Moscow has also rejected proposals from Kiev and its allies for a 30-day unconditional ceasefire. In the UK, a car plows into a crowd of football fans in Liverpool. At least 4 people have been seriously injured and many more hospitalised. The fans had gathered to celebrate Liverpool's Premier League title victory. A British man, believed to be the driver of the car, has been arrested. The police have ruled out terrorism. Sri Lanka's leftist government says it is selling a failed hotel project. This marks its first privatization move. President Dissanayake had previously been reluctant to sell state assets, but since winning the presidency last year, he has made a U-turn on the terms of the IMF bailout, which was agreed upon by his predecessor, Ranil Wickremesinghe. South Korea bans 2 of its former acting presidents from traveling overseas. It's because of an investigation into Yoon Suk-yeol's martial law bid last December. That decision led to the former president being removed from office after being impeached. South Koreans go to the polls next week to elect Yoon's successor. And a huge explosion at a Chinese chemical plant kills at least 5 people. 6 more are still missing. This incident took place in the eastern Shandong province. Industrial accidents occur regularly in Chinese factories where safety standards are often flouted.
Germany says Ukraine can now hit any Russian target it feels necessary. Berlin also signaled that it would no longer publicly announce what and how many weapons it will be sending to Ukraine. Moscow has once again issued a stern warning to Berlin, calling it a dangerous move. But the big question is, will Germany provide the Taurus missiles to Ukraine, and why it could tilt the scales of Kiev's favor?
This week, the battlefield in Ukraine has exploded into chaos. Russian forces have unleashed relentless waves of missiles and drone swarms, pounding Ukrainian cities from Kharkiv to Odessa. Air raid sirens wail night and day. Firefighters race from one smoldering ruin to another. Ukraine's defenses are stretched thin. Now, in a new twist, Germany has dropped a bombshell. Berlin has declared it will no longer reveal the types or quantities of weapons it's sending to Ukraine. But behind this veil of secrecy, one name is electrifying military circles. The Taurus missile, if delivered, this stealthy, precision-guided cruise missile could be the game-changer Ukraine desperately needs. For a Ukrainian military battered by Russia's latest onslaught, the Taurus could flip the script, taking the fight to the heart of Russian logistics and command. For now, Ukraine has a range of long-range weaponry in its arsenal. Ukraine is already using the Storm Shadow missiles against targets inside Russia. Storm Shadow is an Anglo-French cruise missile with a maximum range of around 250 kilometers and made in UK. The French call it Scalp. The American Army Tactical Missile System, or ATACMS, are US-made tactical, ballistic missile with a range of up to 300 kilometers. It is known for its accuracy and speed, reaching up to Mach 3. Then there is Neptune missile, a homegrown Ukrainian missile, initially designed as an anti-ship weapon. It was later modified to strike land targets, including military infrastructure and air defense systems. Now, Taurus, which has an extended range of 500 km, can substantially increase the strike range of Ukrainian military. It can penetrate through dense air defense systems and destroy the hardened bunkers on ground. Until now, Germany under Olaf Scholz refused to hand over Taurus, fearing escalation. But Friedrich Merz has long criticized that caution. While Merz hasn't confirmed the delivery yet, his new policy of secrecy signals a shift from hesitation to resolve. Moscow is furious and has warned Berlin, pointing towards its changing stance.
Yesterday he made such a pretentious statement that from now on and forever there will be no range restrictions on strikes. Remarkably, he was talking on behalf of not only his country, but also France, the UK, and the US. In a few minutes or in an hour, Mr. Merz's vice-chancellor said that nothing like that is or was on agenda.
For Ukraine, this could be the beginning of a new offensive phase. For Russia, it could mean war reaches deeper into territory it thought untouchable.
We earlier spoke to Lieutenant General Ben, who is a retired ex-commanding general and NATO senior mentor for logistics, and this is what he told us.
First of all, we have been providing weapons to Ukraine for more than 3 years, actually going back to the first Trump administration when we provided Javelin to the Ukrainians. So this is not something new. And the Russians continuously threatening anybody that does something to help Ukraine, somehow creating this narrative that the Russians are the victims here, of course, is typical Russian nonsense and a false narrative. Ukraine has the right to defend itself, and I think it's appropriate that we help Ukraine defend itself against these attacks that are killing innocent Ukrainian civilians.
Now, the ongoing nuclear deal negotiations between Iran and the United States have hit a roadblock, with Iran refusing to suspend uranium enrichment, a key demand from Washington. Now, when asked this question, Iran's Foreign Ministry spokesperson Ismail Bakai claimed the information was a figment of imagination and false. Iran has insisted on its right to enrich uranium for civilian purposes, considering the U.S. demand a red line that violates the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, to which it is a signatory. According to Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi, the core issue of enrichment itself was non-negotiable. The U.S. wants Iran to stop enriching uranium, with U.S. envoy Steve Witkoff stating that the U.S. could not authorize even 1% of enrichment by Iran. Now, after the latest round of Omani-mediated talks in Rome last week, U.S. President Donald Trump described the negotiation as very good, while Iran's foreign minister described it as complicated and unlikely to be resolved in 2 or 3 meetings. Omani Foreign Minister Badr al-Sudaidi hoped the outstanding issues would be clarified in the coming days. According to Iran's Foreign Ministry, no date has yet been set for the next talks. The talks, which began in April, are the highest level contact between the two countries since the United States quit a landmark 2015 nuclear accord during Trump's first term as a U.S. president. The talks incidentally came ahead of a June meeting of the UN nuclear watchdog, the Vienna-based International Atomic Energy Agency, or IAEA, now, during which Iran's nuclear activities will be reviewed. Now, the talks also come before the October expiry of the 2015 nuclear accord. The 2015 accord aimed to allay U.S. and European Union suspicions that Iran was seeking nuclear weapon capability. While Iran denies this admission, as per reports, it is now enriching uranium to 60% below the 90% level needed for a nuclear warhead, by far above the 3.67% cap.
The U.S. is rethinking its military footprint in East Asia, and that could mean pulling thousands of troops out of South Korea. Right now, the Pentagon is weighing whether to relocate about 4,500 service members to other locations in the Indo-Pacific, possibly Guam. It's part of an internal policy review focused on North Korea, but also reflects growing concerns about China. Officials say the proposal isn't on President Trump's desk yet, but it remains under active consideration. If approved, it would mark the most significant shift in U.S. troop levels on the Korean Peninsula in years. Currently, the U.S. maintains about 28,000 troops in South Korea. That presence has long served as a deterrent against North Korean aggression and a cornerstone of the U.S.-South Korea alliance. But top U.S. commanders are urging caution. General Xavier Brunson, head of U.S. Forces Korea, recently testified before Congress that any drawdown would be, quote, problematic. He warned it could undermine the U.S.'s ability to impose costs on North Korea, China, or Russia in a crisis. Admiral Samuel Paparo, head of U.S. INDOPACOM, says pulling troops from the peninsula would reduce America's ability to prevail in conflict. South Korea's defense ministry said it has not held any discussions with Washington about reducing troop levels. The Pentagon is pushing back on reports that the idea is anything other than that, an idea. Chief spokesperson Sean Parnell posted on X that reports of a troop cut are, quote, not true. He said the U.S. routinely reviews its global force posture, but that its commitment to South Korea remains, quote, ironclad. The discussion reflects a longer-running debate inside U.S. defense circles. During his first term, President Donald Trump questioned the cost of keeping American troops in South Korea. Eldridge Colby, the U.S. Undersecretary for Defense Policy, in particular, argues that U.S. forces should not be stationed in South Korea solely to deal with the North Korean threat. He says the bigger challenge is China, and that allies like Seoul should shoulder more responsibility for conventional defense. If some forces are moved to Guam, military analysts say it could provide more strategic flexibility. The island is close enough to respond quickly to a crisis, but far enough to be less vulnerable to attack. It's also becoming a central hub for the Pentagon's Pacific operations. As we've said, no final decisions are being made at this time, but the proposal shows how the Trump administration is rethinking America's military footprint in East Asia, balancing deterrence, costs, and new regional threats.
Today, President Trump claims Russia's Vladimir Putin is playing with fire in its war with Ukraine. Trump, who for months signaled to Russia a scaling back of U.S. support for Ukraine, wrote on social media today, quote, "What Putin doesn't realize is that if it weren't for me, lots of really bad things would have already happened to Russia. And I mean really bad." His criticism comes on the heels of Russia's largest drone attack yet, 900 launched in just 3 days, killing dozens of Ukrainians and injuring more than 100, according to Ukrainian officials.
I'm not happy with what Putin's doing. He's killing a lot of people, and I don't know what the hell happened to Putin. I've known him a long time, always gotten along with him, but he's sending rockets into cities and killing people, and I don't like it at all.
Putin has avoided criticizing Trump directly, instead suggesting the president is showing signs of, quote, emotional overload. Following Russia's latest attack, major allies, including Germany, France, and the U.S., lifted Ukraine's range restrictions, meaning they can now fire weapons farther into Russia. A move Russia asserts is a serious escalation. Ukrainian President Zelensky has called on the U.S. and Europe to impose new, strong sanctions against Russia. But Trump's criticism of Putin hasn't brought a change in tone towards Zelensky. Trump saying the Ukrainian president is doing his country no favors by talking the way he does. Both sides now under renewed pressure to find common ground and end the war, a deal Trump has vowed to broker. Special Envoy General Keith Kellogg today said on Fox News he expects new talks between all countries may happen soon in Geneva.
And then you eventually go to somewhere where you get all three major leaders of all the parties. You get the President Putin, and President Zelensky together and hammer this thing out and come to some type of signed document that ends this war.
And today, Russia's foreign minister said Trump and Putin have agreed to prepare for a prisoner swap between the U.S. and Russia, though neither side has provided any other details. Christiane Cornero.
And now on to a flashpoint in the holy city of Jerusalem, the Al-Aqsa Mosque. The religious site once again saw far-right Israelis breach its grounds under heavy police protection on Jerusalem Day, which commemorates Israel's occupation of the eastern part of the city in 1967. Now, during the state-funded annual march, hundreds of settlers chanted racist and insulting slogans like "Death to Arabs" and "Gaza is ours" as they rallied throughout the streets. They also confronted Palestinians in the Muslim quarters, harassed and attacked them despite heavy deployment of border police. Groups of young Israelis were seen carrying national flags, dancing, and using profane language to the onlookers.
Eretz Israel, and there's no like Am Yisrael. There's nothing like this. I have the chills just standing here. You could feel the energy.
Every day that I live in Israel, I'm proud of it. I don't regret any day. Here in Jerusalem Day, this is the day, this is the day. I was up on Har Bayit, I talked to God, I prayed to Him. This is the important day, it's Jerusalem Day. This is our day of the Jews. If you look around, everyone here is in blue and white. This is our day of Jerusalem.
Other Israeli far-right politicians, including the national security minister, also entered the mosque earlier in the day. He said he prayed for the return of the remaining Hamas-held hostages in Gaza.
With Sin Jerusalem Day, the holiday of Jerusalem, Minister Wasserlauf, member of Knesset Kreuzer, Rabbi Kreuzer, who is here, truly, so many Jews flooding the Temple Mount. What a joy to see it. Today, thank God, it is already possible to pray on the Temple Mount, to bow on the Temple Mount, and we thank God for that. And we will continue.
Now, in Islamic tradition, the Al-Aqsa Mosque in Jerusalem is the third holiest site, and many Palestinians view it as a symbol of national identity and their capital when they obtained independent statehood. For Jews, it's known as Temple Mount and is considered Judaism's holiest place. However, under an old agreement, only Muslims are allowed to pray inside Al-Aqsa, while non-Muslims can visit but not worship there. Israel claims all of Jerusalem, including the Palestinian majority areas in the east, as its capital, hence increasing visits by Israeli settlers is perceived as attempts to change the current status quo. Now, most countries consider Jerusalem as an occupied territory and reject Israel's sovereignty claims. But in 2017, President Donald Trump broke with global consensus, recognizing the entire city as Israel's capital and moving the American embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. This year's Jerusalem Day unfolded against the backdrop of the ongoing Gaza war, stretching into its 20th month, and rising violence in the West Bank.
انتصارا لمظلومية الشعب الفلسطيني ومجاهديه ورفضا لجريمة الإبادة الجماعية التي يقترفها العدو الصهيوني بحق إخواننا في قطاع غزة وردا على اقتحام الآلاف من قطعان اليهود الصهاينة.
In support of the oppressed Palestinian people and their mujahideen, and in rejection of the crime of genocide perpetrated by the Zionist enemy against our brothers in the Gaza Strip, and in response to the storming of Al-Aqsa Mosque by thousands of Zionist Jewish herds and their desecration of its holy courtyards. The Yemeni Armed Forces Missile Force carried out a qualitative double military operation with 2 ballistic missiles. One of them, a hypersonic Palestine II missile, targeted Lod Airport, known in Israel as Ben Gurion Airport, in the occupied Jaffa region. The other, a Du Ulfikar missile, targeted a vital Zionist enemy target east of the occupied Jaffa region. The operation successfully achieved its goal, thanks to God, and caused millions of usurping Zionists to rush to shelters, halting air traffic at the airport. The genocide against our brothers in the Gaza Strip, along with the siege and starvation, is a crime unprecedented in human history. This necessitates that all free people from our nation and the world take action to uphold justice, defend humanity, and fulfill their duty toward the oppressed Palestinian people. Our operations, with God's help, are continuing, and we work, relying on God, to escalate them. They will not cease until the aggression against Gaza stops and the siege is lifted.